Ladies and gentlemen, in December of 1988, Regis Andrew Brown and Paul Michael Ayersman were arrested for committing a series of burglaries and robberies in the city of Newcastle. One of the burglaries occurred on Wallace Avenue in the city, and stolen from the residence was a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver. At that time, Regis Brown was residing at 302 Highland Avenue, and it was believed that his neighbor, Bryce Kenneth Tompkins, witnessed one of the burglaries committed by Mr. Brown and Mr. Ayersman. On December 26, 1988, Mr. Tompkins' body was discovered partially submerged in the Neshannock Creek in Lawrence County. An autopsy revealed that Mr. Tompkins was murdered with a .38 caliber pistol. He was shot 2 times in the back. On March 19, 2018, Trooper Joseph Fischetti and Trooper Justin Warner interviewed Mr. Brown, who had recently been arrested for a double murder of his wife and stepdaughter. During the interview, Mr. Brown confessed that he and Mr. Ayersman had killed Tompkins because he had witnessed their involvement in the burglary on Wallace Avenue. He described where the killing occurred, the motive for it, the disposal of the body, and the subsequent bearing of the .38 caliber pistol. Pennsylvania State Police attempted to locate the buried weapon on 2 separate occasions, but were unsuccessful due to the location being demolished and filled in with dirt and fill. However, several witnesses have been developed in this case throughout the entire investigation and are prepared to testify to their knowledge of the killing. Their identities are presently being withheld due to Mr. Brown's connection and involvement with the Outlaw Motorcycle Club. Mr. Brown has been charged with 1 count of criminal homicide, 2 counts of aggravated assault, and 1 count of intimidation of a witness. Because he is charged with homicide, there is no bail in this case. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is the most recent example of the steadfast determination to duty of the Pennsylvania State Police, and it serves to reassure all Pennsylvanians that no homicide case is ever closed until it is actually solved. We do have a picture of the defendant, and we will be providing that. But are there any questions at this time? Yes?
Did he ever confess to any other killing?
Yes, he was interviewed on several different occasions. He did provide information that the Pennsylvania State Police are investigating, and it is related to other homicides. Those cases are pending right now, so we can't get into the specifics of what exactly he said and which cases we're referring to. But yes, he did provide other information related to other homicides.
Could you say how many?
Yes, he's either been arrested for...
Yeah, come on, John.
He's either been arrested for or confessed to or is a strong suspect in 8 homicides right now. In the northwestern part of the state, from Lawrence County up to Erie, dating in range from 1986 to as recently as 2 years ago. And we can't get into a lot of specifics about that because there is some pending investigations going on with that. We've done extensive interviews with him. He was in and around Lawrence County back in the late 70s and early 80s. He associated with a lot of individuals that we're looking at that are involved in some other homicides back in that era. And he may be tied to or have knowledge to an additional 6 to 8 homicides from that area. And again, those are still open, and we can't get into a lot of detail about those, but he has a checkered past, and he's a violent offender. He was involved in a lot of violent crimes back then. He, back in the early 80s, he held up a convenience store which he shot a clerk, and he's had spent an extensive amount of time in prison. I'm sure you're probably aware he was involved in a double homicide back in March, in which he brutally killed his wife and stepdaughter. And it was a horrendous scene, and he's just a vicious individual.
Where was that double homicide?
That was up in Erie County. The state police, Pennsylvania State Police in Girard arrested him for that.
Are any of those investigations in Lawrence County right now?
We're looking at him. He's been developed as a suspect in another 88 homicide and another homicide that we're looking at back in the early 80s. So right now, we're looking at 3 in addition to Mr. Tompkins' homicide.
Besides the Tompkins case, did he actually confess to any of those others the other 6 to 8?
He has confessed to some. He's been arrested for some. He's been cooperative with us. And he's the type of individual that you have to approach him with the information. And if you have solid information, he will confess. He's cooperating with us. He's never denied an interview. And we still believe there's more out there. And that's what we're asking for, the help of anybody out there that knows anything more to please contact the Pennsylvania State Police in Newcastle.
Has he said why he is cooperating, or why he's confessing?
He hasn't come out specifically, but he knows pretty much the gig is up, per se. He's pretty much defeated it right now. We've interviewed him extensively before. I think that helped. He knew that we knew he did these crimes, and he pretty much is cooperating.
Had he been a person of interest in this case before, this specific case?
Yes, he was. As DA Lamacusa said, he was arrested for a bunch of armed robberies and burglaries in around the area. And he had in possession a 12-gauge Mossberg shotgun that was stolen from the burglary that DA Lamacusa referenced to. So our guys did a good job at the time. The troopers at the time did a good job connecting that. They knew it was from a burglary near where the victim lived. They knew Regis Brown lived 2 doors up from the victim, and things started to click. He did not know Mr. Tompkins. Mr. Tompkins had some mental issues at the time, that he liked to walk around at night, and unfortunately he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Mr. Ersman and Mr. Brown committed the burglary, and he happened to see it while he was walking. And they knew that he liked to walk at night, and they confronted him about it. So, innocent victim. Confront him a few days later. They knew he walked, and he was shot execution style. Just a brutal murder, ruthless.
Is it eight other homicides in Pennsylvania, including 3 in Lawrence?
That's correct.
And then there's an additional 6 to 8 that he is tied to somehow?
Well, yeah, we're looking into that. He associated with a group back in the early 80s, late 70s. He's volunteered that information. He's given us some information about homicides, that he may have been with these individuals. If you remember, there was a homicide back in the late 70s involving the Cadunce family, which was sort of a cult-type killing. And he's made reference that he knows the individuals that were involved in that, and he's associated with them. So I guess misery keeps company.
So you're thinking he may well be either directly or indirectly involved in upwards of 18, 16 to 18?
I would say towards that figure, yes.
Any of them specifically other than the ones we're thinking Lawrence County, any actually in Mercer?
We haven't developed that yet. We've reached out to our other state police, Pennsylvania State Police installations. We're trying to gather as much information as we can, but I wouldn't rule on anything. We're looking at old cold case homicides to see if these can be connected. Mainly, primarily, we're looking at Erie and Lawrence County. We're pulling our resources together to see what he could be involved in.
Any chance he may have done anything in Ohio as well?
That's another issue we're going to look into.
Joe, how long have you been working this case?
10 years.
And I know the family, contacted you for updates and everything, so when you get this call and you're available to call the family and give them this news and give them closure, as a police officer on the beat for all this time on this case, talk to us about that.
It's very fulfilling. The only problem I have right now, and it's sort of a sad issue, is I mainly dealt with the victim's, Bryce's daughter, Kathy Turnbull. She would come up constantly and try to get updates, try to furnish as much information as she can. She passed away 2 or 3 years ago, and it's tough because I wish she was here to enjoy this. And it's sad. That's the only sad issue I have about the case.
But to see the family sitting here and know that they're appreciative of the hard work that the Pennsylvania State Police and all other agencies involved have
Well,
done.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the remarks that DA Lamacusa had, but they're the victims, and we're doing our job. And you know, my partner Justin Warner helped me out tremendously, and I'm very grateful. But the family's the victim here. They've had this nightmare for 30 years, and hopefully got some closure.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
I'm guessing he's already been arraigned at his first hearing.
That's due here within a few weeks. He's going to be arraigned.
So where is he now?
He's been transported to and transferred to the State Correctional Institution in Camp Hill.
Camp Hill?
Yes, which I think is more an interim type placement. I think he'll probably get placed somewhere else, but right now he's temporarily in Camp Hill.
And I may have missed it. What was he actually in prison for when he started making these confessions?
He was in for the double homicide of his wife, Michelle Brown, and his stepdaughter, Tammy Greenewalt, back in March of this year, up in Erie County. The Pennsylvania State Police arrested him for that back in March. He confessed to those crimes. We interviewed him a few days after that. Myself and Trooper Warner, we felt the time was fruitful for him to get some type of confession. And he cooperated with us and confessed immediately. But like I said, we interviewed him back in 2014. He was cooperative. We interviewed him for several hours. He would not confess. But at this time, he knew that I knew that he was involved, and he came forward real quickly.
And you mentioned he's involved in the Outlaw Motorcycle Club.
That's correct.
Do you think, how many of the killings that you think he's connected to were also connected to the club?
He's a suspect in a 1986 homicide back in the Corey area that the state police handled, that was at a bar, that might be affiliated with some type of outlaw motorcycle gang incident. As of right now, we don't know. We're still looking into that. But he had a strong connection, and we know there's a good possibility he can be involved in other ones. He's had an extensive affiliation with them. Our organized crime unit, the state police organized crime unit, has dealt with him in the past, and they're aware of him and his affiliations.
Any of these potential death cases, or are they all pretty much like what
Well, each case would be based upon the specific evidence that we have on that case. This case would not be eligible for the death penalty, so we would not be filing the notice of aggravating circumstances to make it a death penalty case. This would be a general homicide charge that we'd be going forward on, and whether it's a first, second, or third degree homicide would, of course, depend on the evidence that we introduced. But at this time, I do not anticipate that any of the upcoming investigations or charges, unless the facts change, would amount to a death penalty type of case.
59.
He does look a little bit older than his actual age, but he is 59. Anything else?
He's in for life in prison right now, right?
Yes, he was sentenced to life plus 40?
40.
Life plus 40 on the double homicide. This case would obviously run consecutive to anything that he is presently serving, would not run concurrent. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you.